Coin traders, what to do? What's going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Injective Protocol, INJ on that ticker. So another new one on the channel, and it has caught my attention. I've actually dived into the fundamentals quite a lot, and obviously with this type of chart setup, especially since the start of the year, very parabolic as you can see. So we're going to talk about this chart setup and some targets and supports and things like that for upcoming and what we can actually expect as a plausible scenario for Injective INJ. If you do enjoy this type of content, would appreciate you hitting the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. We will be talking about a lot more cryptos like this, so make sure you do stay updated. But let's go ahead and talk about Injective basics really quick right now. Now, it is a layer 1 smart contract chain that's pretty much branded as being for finance, so primarily DeFi and things like that. Really quick finality and block times. We do have circulating supply right now of 80 million out of the total supply of 100 million. So about 80% full dilution, until full dilution anyway. Market cap's not necessarily that high. We're looking at about 657 million, so way less than the 1 billion mark. But we know that, especially with 100 million as the max supply right now for Injective, we could expect a lot really high returns and a pretty big market cap out of Injective. So even with a 10x gain right now, would be looking at about 82, which would be about a 6.5 billion. So definitely reasonable for a nice, strong bull market. Obviously, just a little bit of hopium there for you. So do want to talk about the overall crypto chart today. And with such massive gains, like we said, natural to assume a little bit of pullback, and we still could be expecting a little bit more reasonably in the chart here. So I guess I do want to flip over and start talking about the weekly first. So let's go ahead and talk about long term. As you can see, before we had this current weekly that closed last week, big massive spike to the upside. We were actually riding pretty long around this 12-period exponential moving average. So as you can see, wick, and we bounced off of that quite nice, and then also effectively found that as resistance before we had our nice upside move at the start of the year. Now, if we turn on RSI Relative Strength Index, we were peaking out at 84.61, was extremely high, especially given the current state of the rest of the crypto space. Now, obviously, we had an extreme rally and a lot of hype and euphoria come into this. So naturally, after such a big, strong parabolic move, we do anticipate a lot of high risk and profit taking for selling pressure to pull back and actually retrace the price down here. Now, we do have one extreme major point of support that's pretty much right around 450 down to the closing level of resistance, which is at 431. So that's going to be an extremely big point if we do see a continuation and flush. But we know that the volume's actually not necessarily that strong right now. So for example, if we flip into the 2-day, we can see a little bit of a taper off so far. Now, we do have just about a day left. So if we do see a lot of sell pressure, we could actually get this volume spike to actually see a little bit of increasing day on day, which would return the price down to one of those levels. However, while we are in the 2-day chart right now, I actually flip back into the weekly. Sorry, so we are flipping back into 2-day. The $6 level is going to be the big point of resistance that we have looked at for day on day after finding finally an initial bullish break of this level that pushed prices to the upside. So $6 level is going to be an extremely big level of support as well. So if we do see a retracement to that level, I wouldn't be surprised. And that would actually be a pretty nice entry as well for new entries into Injective. So for example, even from that level up to the current trend high would be about a 60% gain. Obviously from the trend high down to that level is about a 40% retracement, and then even down to the level that we set at 450 or so, about a 55% retracement, so nothing abnormal there. But if we actually go ahead and zoom out from the end of the year, take a Fibonacci from where we actually bottomed out to this current trend high, we can see that the level at 38.2 is one of the targets, which would come in at 6.63. Up above that, though, is actually where we have been finding support so far at the 23.6, currently at 790. So as we can see in the current candle, that's where we're finding a very nice touch off of this defense. And actually, this is what we like to see if we can see a little bit more upside, even some consolidation, maintaining this pattern, and then actually retracing and seeing our continuation on in that instance. Personally, though, I think we are going to get a little bit more of a retracement than that. When we do see these parabolic type moves, we do get a pretty significant and substantial retracement, which ultimately does end up consolidating, and then typically that forms the basis for the next parabolic move to continue. So we are watching INJ right now, but I don't think this is necessarily the time that I'm going to be making any new entries, just since risk is so high after such an extreme growth after such a short period of time. So even if we flip on over into the 1 month chart, for example, you can just see month over month's been pretty insane for the last 4 months ever since the start of the year. So we are going to be due here for that retracement and pullback. Now, in typical uptrends like this, we always have the shorter time frames in control first because typically we do rely on the shorter time frame signals first. So for example, when we look at the hourly, if we actually pull up the RSI, we can know that the overextended RSI is typically a much better buy signal than when we do see longer terms pulling back. So if that doesn't really make sense, drop a note in the comments below. But essentially, I'm going to be showing you what I mean right here. So currently we found a bottom for RSI right about 30.50. Previously, before that, the last lower low on RSI was back at the 8th of April. We found 31.47. Didn't quite get to or below the 30 line, but actually found a bottom before a nice bounce and rally to the upside. And then even before that, the last time we got anywhere near this level was at the end of March. Again, found our nice bottom and a huge rally again after that. So not necessarily a huge prediction, but we know that the last several times we have seen the hourly RSI this low, we actually have had a little bit of a bottom come in for this longer term uptrend. Because we know for a trend, we have to have higher highs and higher lows, which does mean we do have to have a pullback to establish that low. So typically where we find the low point is going to be based on the shorter term trends, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. So the fact that we are finding a bottom along with an extended RSI that is almost to the oversold level typically is a pretty good indication. Now, the next thing I do want to talk about is that if we actually flip over to the 15-minute chart, we can actually see a pretty nice bullish divergence here where we actually have higher lows on the RSI coming in, but yet meanwhile, we do have lower lows in price. So typically we know that that is a sign of strength growing to the upside, yet finding our overextension to the downside after finding our support. So typically in this instance, we do look for a little bit higher highs in price. Now, that's not necessarily to say that we're going to top out and see a higher high over about 920, but typically that does mean we are going to be expecting some upside pressure, and for that we would be expecting a run up to about the $9 resistance point, which looking left has been a point of pretty much good solid support, and then also big extreme resistance before hitting our current trend high right now, just below the $10 level. So one thing though, when we talk about the shorter time frame charts, a lot of that does depend on overall volume, and especially too when we zoom out. So for example, on the 4-hour right now, about 30 minutes until we close, and it has been 4-hour, hour-over-hour bar of decreasing bearish volume. So a little bit of a fading selling pressure. So we are going to be coming down, trying to test and find a support soon. But when we actually talk about some of the shorter time frames, we don't rely on this as much, even though it might seem kind of scary, given the fact that we do have shorter hourly or 5-minute over periods of increasing a bullish volume. So not necessarily the best sign as opposed to just 5-minute continuous upside volume, but that's not really realistic and expected in most situations, especially in markets like this. So right now, flipping back into the 12-hour, and essentially what we look for in the 12-hour is we are still maintaining the trend. So now pulling back to set that higher low. If we do get a lower high in that instance, we are going to need to defend the current level. And that's pretty much where we're going to look at to see kind of where on the Fibonacci retracement that does set up, since typically that's that good guide, especially since if we zoom out, we don't really have that much opportunity to see previous price action, since this chart is still relatively new on a lot of the centralized exchanges providing this type of data. So what I'm trying to say is that typically in these parabolic type moves, and essentially in just general 12-hour uptrends, we do look for a pullback setting that low, and then typically we are going to find about a lower high to confirm whether or not we are going to go into a little bit of longer consolidation. Because after such strong parabolic moves, it's not really realistic to think one bounce is all it's going to take before actually running up and seeing our next high, although that's not impossible to think. So for now in the current setup, shorter time frames are still in control, but we do still have to be extremely mindful of some of these longer term charts, especially given how overextended they are, because we do know that at some point we are going to be due for that retracement and pullback, which will be a little bit of a prolonged time since it does have to normalize and neutralize on this longer term chart. But for now, like we said, just focusing on the shorter time frames. So we are looking at specifically like the hourly is looking really good. And if you were wanting to kind of bottom fish this $8 level, there's actually not going to be necessarily as much risk to the downside. So if you did want to put your stop loss slightly below that in a trade, could be looking at most about 6%. To the upside, we're looking at about 11 all the way up to about 20. So potentially more than a 2x, which is what we look for in trade types like this. But still would recommend, obviously, a super small position, and obviously allow yourself room to scale in if that is the play you are going to be making. And don't forget to start taking profit on the way up to adjust your break-even price on the way back down. With that, though, that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up our update and analysis on Injective INJ on that ticker. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button if you have not done so just yet. Do appreciate it as always. Also appreciate all the continued love and support. It does mean so much. Stay safe. Take care, everyone. I'll catch you back in the next video.